Chapter 1. The stage is set. The sun had barely risen over Sao Paulo as the crew of Luminous Edge Productions gathered at the sprawling venue, their energy a mix of determination and sleep deprivation. The venue, a towering industrial-style warehouse converted into a state-of-the-art conference hall, buzzed with the promise of a high-stakes corporate event that would stream live to millions worldwide. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that only came with assembling a show that balanced perfection with chaos. Jax Torres, the team's lead technician, stood at the heart of the stage, his steel blue eyes scanning the crew's progress. Known for his unshakable focus under pressure, Jax thrived in the madness. To him, every cable was a vein, every spotlight a heartbeat. He was methodical, almost surgical, as he barked orders to the team. Emilia, double-check those LED panels. Angles have to be perfect, he called out, his voice cutting through the chatter. Emilia Vasquez, the team's lighting designer, tilted her head and adjusted her headphones. With a flair for color and shadow, she saw light not just as an element, but as an emotional narrative. Though her artistry earned respect, her tendency to challenge authority often led to tension. "We're good, Jax," she replied sharply. "Unless, of course, you want me to reimagine the laws of physics while I'm at it." Jax opened his mouth to counter, but stopped when Luke DuPont strolled in, carrying a tower of cables. With his boyish charm and boundless enthusiasm, Luke was the youngest member of the team. He often served as the glue, diffusing conflicts with humor. "Relax, you too. It's not like the fate of the event rests on those panels." "Oh wait, it kinda does." Emilia rolled her eyes, but a small smile tugged at her lips. Jax simply muttered something under his breath and returned to his checklist. In the control room overlooking the stage, Naomi Lee, the production manager, monitored the scene through a labyrinth of monitors. Naomi's sharp mind and knack for multitasking made her the backbone of the operation. Every decision, from sound levels to camera angles, went through her. Today, however, her normally calm demeanor was cracking, partly from stress and partly because the event start time loomed ominously close. "Where's Troy?" Naomi asked, her voice tinged with irritation. Troy Bennett, the audio engineer, was infamous for his unpredictable nature. Brilliant with sound but a wild card in every other aspect, Troy had a habit of either saving the day or causing a disaster. As if on cue, Troy appeared, carrying a tangled mess of wires. Sorry. Traffic was a nightmare. But hey, I've got the magic touch. This place is gonna sound like heaven." Naomi shot him a look that could cut glass. "It better, or you'll be explaining to the client why their keynote speaker's mic cuts out mid-sentence." Down on the floor, the setup intensified. Trusses rose to the ceiling, spotlights beamed in timed sequences, and LED panels flickered with test patterns. The team moved like a well-oiled machine until it happened. A loud pop echoed through the venue, followed by a flicker of lights and a sudden blackout. For a moment, silence reigned, save for the hushed murmurs of confusion. Then chaos erupted. "What the?" Jax exclaimed, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Naomi's voice crackled through the comms. "Talk to me, people. What just happened?" In the corner, Luke crouched near a tangle of cables, his face pale. He had been tasked with connecting the main power line, but in his haste, he might have— "Oh no," he whispered. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized the gravity of his mistake. "Luke, what did you do?" Jax's voice was sharp, his frustration barely contained. I think I crossed the wrong cables," Luke stammered. "It was just for a second, but—" "Are you kidding me?" Emilia snapped. "Do you realize what you've done? The entire system could be fried." Naomi's voice boomed over the comms. "Enough. This isn't the time to point fingers. Fix it, now." Panic gripped the crew as they scrambled to assess the damage. Troy inspected the audio console, muttering curses under his breath. Emilia climbed onto the rig to check the lighting grid. Jax moved with purpose, directing the team, though his anger simmered just below the surface. In the midst of the chaos, Luke stood frozen. doubt and fear gnawed at him. But beneath it all, a spark of determination ignited. He had made a mistake, but he wouldn't let it define him. As the minutes ticked by, tension reached a boiling point. Would they restore power in time? And more importantly, would their client ever trust them again? Chapter 2, A Race Against Time. The venue was plunged into an unnatural stillness, lit only by the faint flicker of emergency lights and the eerie glow of unresponsive LED panels. In the tension-filled silence, even the faintest sound, a cough, a shuffled footstep, seemed amplified. The countdown clock on the wall was relentless, ticking away the minutes until showtime. The once meticulously planned event was now teetering on the brink of disaster. Jax straightened up from his crouch position near the main power box, his jaw clenched, and his usually calm demeanor fraying. "Naomi, what's the situation from your end? What's still functional?" In the control room, Naomi frantically tapped on her tablet, her fingers flying across diagnostics and systems checks. Her voice came through the comms, clipped and urgent. Partial functionality on the LED panels. They're running on backup power, but it's unstable. Audio is completely offline, and the lighting rig, let's just say, it's not winning any awards tonight. Jax swore under his breath. Perfect. Luke was still rooted in place near the power cables, guilt weighing him down like an anchor. It had been a simple task, connect the cables, test the line, but in his haste, he had misread the labels. He replayed the mistake over and over in his mind, every detail searing itself into his memory. "I can fix it," he blurted out suddenly, his voice cracking. Jack spun around, his frustration boiling over. "You? Haven't you done enough already?" "Hey," Emilia cut in sharply, stepping between them. "Enough with the blame game. We need solutions, not a shouting match." Troy appeared from behind a stack of equipment cases, his expression unusually serious. "She's right. We've got, what, an hour? Maybe less? Let's focus. Jax, you're the guy with the big picture. What do you need?" Jax took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. His mind raced, assessing the damage and prioritizing tasks. "All right, listen up. Troy, get the spare audio console set up. Naomi, see if you can reroute power to the critical systems. Forget the extras, just focus on what we absolutely need. Emilia, run a full check on the lighting grid. And Luke," he hesitated, his eyes softening just slightly. "You're with me. We're tackling the power issue." Luke nodded, a flicker of determination sparking in his eyes. He knew he couldn't undo his mistake, but he was determined to make it right, or at least help fix it. The team dispersed, each member diving into their assigned task. Naomi's voice crackled over the comms as she coordinated efforts. "Backup power is holding steady, but it's like patching a sinking ship with duct tape. Whatever you're doing down there, make it fast." Luke followed Jax to the backstage area, where the main power hub stood like a dormant beast. Jax knelt beside the console, his fingers deftly flipping switches and checking connections. Luke hovered nearby, his hands trembling slightly. "Stop shaking and focus," Jax said, not unkindly. "You wanted to fix this? Here's your chance." Luke nodded and crouched beside him, his eyes scanning the tangled web of cables. Jax handed him a multimeter and pointed to a specific junction. "Test that line. We need to isolate the short." Luke's hands steadied as he worked, the repetitive motions grounding him. For the first time since the blackout, he felt a sliver of hope. "This one's clear," he reported. "Good," Jax replied. "Now, check the—" A loud crack interrupted him, followed by a shower of sparks from the lighting rig overhead. Emilia's voice came through the comms, strained but calm. "A minor hiccup. I'm on it." "Define minor," Jax muttered under his breath before refocusing on the task at hand. As the minutes ticked by, the team's efforts began to coalesce. The spare audio console powered up with a low hum, and Naomi's rerouted systems showed signs of stability. But the main power issue remained unresolved, and the clock was merciless. Finally, Luke found it, a frayed cable hidden behind a panel, its insulation worn down to the wire. "Here, this has to be it." Jax inspected the cable, nodding grimly. "Good catch. Cut the power to this line and replace it with a new one. We've got about 10 minutes. Luke worked quickly, his earlier hesitation replaced by a sense of urgency. As he secured the new cable and tested the line, the hum of the main power system returned, low and steady. The lights flickered briefly before stabilizing, casting the venue in a warm glow. We're back online. Naomi's voice came through the comms, triumphant. Still running on backups for some systems, but we're operational. Relief washed over the crew, but there was no time to celebrate. The event was set to start in minutes, and there was still work to be done. Jack stood and clapped Luke on the shoulder. Good job. Now, let's make this show happen. Luke managed a small smile, the weight of his earlier mistake lifting slightly. He knew they weren't out of the woods yet, but for the first time, he felt like part of the solution instead of the problem. Chapter 3, Fractures and Focus. The venue buzzed back to life, but the air still carried a palpable tension. The countdown clock on the wall now read 45 minutes to showtime. The pressure had eased slightly with the return of power, yet the cracks in the team's unity remained visible. This wasn't just a technological issue anymore, it was personal. Jack stepped down from a makeshift power hub and surveyed the stage. The LED panels glowed with steady light, and the lighting grid above pulsed in time with Emilia's adjustments. The audio console hummed under Troy's deft touch, and Naomi's focused voice in the comms ensured no detail slipped through the cracks. But beneath it all was the lingering question. Could they still pull this off flawlessly? Luke lingered near the power hub, his hands still covered in grease from the frayed cable replacement. Though he had helped restore the power, he felt no closer to redeeming himself. His gaze darted nervously between the equipment and his teammates, their expressions a mix of concentration and restrained frustration. All right, people, Naomi's voice came sharply over the comms, breaking the silence. We're operational, but not out of the woods yet. Focus on your assignments. Jack's final checks on the rigging. Troy, audio tests. Emilia, adjust for a warmer tone on the stage lights. We don't want the client looking like a ghost on camera. And Luke braced himself. Help Emilia. Naomi finished. Her tone was neutral, almost dismissive, and it stung more than any reprimand. He wasn't trusted to handle anything critical, not after his mistake. Emilia raised an eyebrow at him but didn't protest. Fine, follow me. The two climbed onto the scaffolding near the lighting grid, where Emilia handed Luke a screwdriver and gestured to a row of panels. Loosen those screws and recalibrate the angles. We need these to hit the center of the stage, not the audience's faces. Luke nodded and got to work, grateful for the task, but acutely aware of Emilia's watchful gaze. She worked alongside him, her movements swift and precise. The occasional burst of static from the comms filled the silence between them. Finally, Luke couldn't take it anymore. You don't trust me, he said quietly. Emilia didn't look up from her work. Not right now, no. Her bluntness stung. But Luke appreciated the honesty. I know I messed up, he said, but I'm not useless. Emilia paused, her hands hovering over a light panel. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Look, everyone messes up. Even Jax has had his share of screw-ups. But the thing is, you can't just say you're not useless. You have to prove it. To all of us, including yourself. Luke swallowed hard and nodded. I will. Meanwhile, in the control room, Naomi sat hunched over her console, her sharp eyes darting between screens. Despite her composed exterior, the stress was wearing her down. She knew the team was on edge, and she felt the weight of their doubts and frustrations. But there was no time to address the fractures in their unity. The show had to go on. Troy's voice crackled through the comms, breaking her train of thought. Naomi, audio levels are stable, but there's a slight reverb on the main mic. Can you compensate for that? Naomi sighed and adjusted the settings. Done. Anything else? Yeah. Troy replied with a grin she could hear in his voice. How about a coffee delivery? Extra sugar? Naomi couldn't help but crack a small smile. You're on your own for that, Bennett. Down on the stage, Jax inspected the rigging one last time. His hands moved with practiced ease, but his mind was elsewhere. He had always prided himself on being a strong leader, someone the team could rely on. But tonight, he felt the cracks in his own facade. Luke's mistake had shaken him more than he cared to admit, not because of the error itself, but because it revealed a vulnerability in the team's dynamics. As he tightened the last bolt, Jax glanced toward the scaffolding where Amelia and Luke were working. He couldn't hear their conversation, but he noticed a shift in Luke's posture, less hesitant, more confident. Maybe there was hope yet. Jax, Naomi's voice came through the comms, pulling him back to the present. Final client walkthrough in 10 minutes. Are we ready? Jax took a deep breath. We'll be ready. But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling that the night's challenges weren't over yet. Chapter 4, Shadows of Doubt. The minutes leading up to the final client walkthrough felt like an eternity. The venue, though operational, buzzed with an undercurrent of unease. Every team member was laser-focused on their tasks, but the collective exhaustion and tension were difficult to ignore. It was as if the weight of the earlier crisis still hung over them, threatening to resurface at the slightest misstep. Naomi, from her vantage point in the control room, scanned the monitors. The visuals were crisp, the lighting bathed the stage in a warm, inviting glow, and the audio levels appeared stable. Yet, something gnawed at her, a faint sense that not everything was as it seemed. She leaned closer to her screen, her sharp eyes picking up on a subtle delay in the video feed. "Troy," she called through the comms, her voice taut. "Check the video sync. There's a minor lag on camera 3. On it," Troy replied, his brow furrowing as he adjusted the settings on his console. The reverb issue from earlier had been resolved, but it seemed the system still had its quirks. He sighed, muttering to himself, "It's like this setup has a mind of its own." Meanwhile, on the scaffolding, Amelia and Luke had completed their adjustments and descended to the stage floor. Amelia headed off to double-check the lighting sequences, leaving Luke standing alone, his gaze wandering over the labyrinth of cables and equipment. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of pride. He had helped restore power, recalibrated lights, and most importantly, he hadn't made another mistake yet. "Luke," Jax's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. The lead technician strode across the stage, his expression unreadable. "Come with me." Luke followed Jax backstage, where a cluster of equipment cases formed an impromptu workbench. Jax picked up a diagram of the venue's electrical layout and spread it out on one of the cases. "Here's the deal." Jax began, his tone measured but firm. "You've been doing all right since the blackout, but I need you to be sharp. No second-guessing, no hesitation. Can you handle that?" Luke met Jax's gaze, his shoulders straightening. "Yes, I can." "Good," Jax said, nodding slightly, "because if anything else goes wrong tonight, we're done. No do-overs, no second chances." The gravity of Jax's words wasn't lost on Luke. He swallowed hard, his determination hardening into resolve. I won't let it." Before Jax could respond, Naomi's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and urgent. "Guys, we have a problem. Camera 3 is offline." Jax cursed under his breath. "Luke, grab a spare cable and follow me." The two of them sprinted to the back of the venue, where the camera operator was frantically inspecting the equipment. The camera itself appeared undamaged, but the signal feed was dead. Jax crouched beside the operator, inspecting the connections. "It's the feed cable," Jax muttered. "Must have been nicked during setup." Luke handed him the spare cable, and Jax quickly connected it. "Test it now," he called to Naomi. "Stand by," Naomi replied. There was a tense pause before her voice came back through the comms. "We're back in sync. Good work." Jax exhaled and stood up, clapping Luke on the shoulder. "Nice job." Luke nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. For the first time that night, he felt like he was earning back his team's trust. As they returned to the stage, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. The crew, though still on edge, seemed to move with renewed purpose. The client walkthrough was just minutes away, and every detail had to be perfect. Up in the control room, Naomi finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. The monitors showed a flawless stage setup, and the countdown clock ticked down to 30 minutes. But as she leaned back in her chair, a shadow of doubt lingered in her mind. She had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, they were telling her that the night's challenges weren't over. Chapter 5. Under the spotlight. The tension in the venue was palpable as the client, a poised executive dressed in an immaculate gray suit, stepped onto the stage for the final walkthrough. Flanked by two assistants, she carried an air of authority that made the crew stand a little straighter and work a little faster. Time seemed to slow as everyone held their breath, waiting for her verdict. Naomi monitored the scene from the control room, her nerves fraying at the edges. Every screen displayed a flawless image, every sound wave on her audio meters was steady, yet she couldn't shake the unease simmering in her chest. She leaned into the mic on her headset. "All right, team, this is it. Let's show them what we've got." Jax was stationed near the side of the stage, his gaze darting between the client and his team. His fingers toyed with the edge of his clipboard, a nervous habit he rarely exhibited. Everything had to be perfect, not just for the client, but for the team. They needed this win to rebuild their confidence after the chaos earlier. The client's voice was smooth but firm as she addressed Naomi over the comms. "Let's start with the lighting. Amelia, you're up," Naomi said. From her station, Amelia triggered the pre-programmed lighting sequence. The stage came alive with a dynamic interplay of color and shadow, each hue carefully calibrated to evoke a sense of innovation and prestige. The client nodded approvingly, though her expression remained neutral. "Good. Let's see the transitions." Amelia's hands moved swiftly across the control panel, transitioning the lighting from bold and dramatic to soft and elegant. The client exchanged a glance with one of her assistants, who gave a slight nod. "Acceptable," she said. Naomi exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "All right, Troy, let's go live with the audio." Troy adjusted the sliders on his console, his movements smooth and practiced. The stage filled with the crisp sound of a pre-recorded voiceover, its tone commanding yet warm. As the voice echoed through the venue, the client's assistants murmured to each other, their expressions approving. "Audio is clear," the client said, her gaze finally landing on the LED panels. "Now, show me the visuals." Luke, standing by the panels, felt his stomach tighten. This was his moment, or rather, the team's moment, but he couldn't help feeling the weight of his earlier mistake. He glanced at Jax, who gave him a subtle nod, as if to say, "You've got this." Amelia triggered the video feed, and the panels lit up with high-definition graphics that seamlessly blended motion and design. The client walked closer, her eyes scanning every detail. For a moment, she said nothing, and the silence was deafening. Finally, she turned to Naomi. "Impressive. Very well done." The team's collective exhale was almost audible. For the first time that night, the tension in the room eased, replaced by a cautious optimism. The client walked back to the center of the stage, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "You have 20 minutes until we go live. Don't let me down." As the client and her entourage left the stage, Jax turned to the team. "All right, you heard her. Final checks. If there's even a hint of an issue, I want to know about it now." The crew dispersed, each member diving into their respective tasks. Luke stayed near the LED panels, his hands moving with newfound confidence as he double-checked the connections. Amelia, despite her earlier frustrations, stopped by and gave him a small nod of approval. "Nice work up there," she said. Luke smiled, the tension in his chest loosening. "Thanks. I'm just glad I didn't mess it up this time." "Don't get too comfortable," she replied with a smirk. "We've still got 20 minutes. Naomi, meanwhile, remained in the control room, her eyes scanning every monitor. She had earned a reputation for her cool composure under pressure, but tonight had tested even her limits. She sipped her now-cold coffee and allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The team had pulled together in the face of adversity, and for now, things seemed to be back on track. But then, almost imperceptibly, one of the monitors flickered, just for a split second, but enough to send a chill down Naomi's spine. She leaned closer, her hand hovering over the controls. "Troy," she said, her voice low. "Do you see that?" Troy frowned, his eyes narrowing at his console. "Yeah, could be a glitch in the feed. I'll check it." Naomi's instincts told her it was more than a simple glitch. She straightened in her chair, her senses on high alert. Whatever it was, she knew they couldn't afford another crisis, not with only minutes left on the clock. Chapter 6, The Breaking Point. The atmosphere inside the venue had turned electric, not just from the adrenaline coursing through the crew, but from an unspoken sense that they were teetering on the edge of something critical. The audience, a mix of corporate executives and high-profile clients, had started filtering into the hall. Conversations in hushed tones filled the air as they took their seats beneath the intricate lattice of lights and LED panels. Everything outwardly appeared polished and professional, exactly as it should. But behind the curtain, the cracks in the production's foundation were beginning to widen. Naomi remained glued to her seat in the control room, her eyes flitting between the screens. The earlier flicker on one of the monitors had left her with an uneasy feeling she couldn't shake. She tapped her headset. "Troy, status on the audio?" "All green here," Troy replied, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. He had been nursing a gnawing suspicion that the sound system's earlier glitches might resurface under the increased load of the live event. He checked the console again, his fingers hesitating over the sliders. Not tonight. Not now, he thought to himself. Down on the stage, Jax stood in his usual spot by the rigging, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His gaze swept over the crew, assessing their movements with the precision of a battlefield general. Luke and Emilia worked side by side near the LED panels, their focus unwavering. While Emilia adjusted the lighting transitions one last time, Luke checked the cable connections, his hands moving with a confidence that had only grown since the night began. "Luke," Jax called out, his voice firm but not unkind. "Status." "All connections are secure," Luke replied. "Panels are good to go." "Let's hope you're right," Jax muttered under his breath. Though Luke had redeemed himself in small ways throughout the night, the weight of the earlier mistake still lingered in Jax's mind. It wasn't just about the equipment, it was about trust. As the countdown clock ticked closer to 0, Naomi's voice came over the comms, sharp and commanding. "All right, everyone, showtime. Stand by for cues." The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the event. The stage glowed with a dramatic interplay of colors, drawing the audience's attention as the opening visuals played across the LED panels. The speakers on stage began their introductions, their voices clear and crisp over the sound system. For the first few minutes, everything unfolded flawlessly. But then it happened. A piercing whine erupted from the speakers, followed by a wave of static that filled the hall. The presenter on stage froze mid-sentence, the microphone in her hand emitting a screech that made the audience wince. The LED panels behind her flickered erratically, their pristine images replaced by bursts of pixelated noise. Panic rippled through the crew like a shockwave. "Troy!" Naomi barked into her headset. "What's going on?" I don't know." Troy stammered, his hands flying across the console in a frantic attempt to isolate the problem. "The levels are spiking for no reason. It's like the system's overheating." "Naomi, we've got a bigger problem." Jax's voice cut in tense and urgent. "The main LED feed just went down. Luke, check the connections." Luke was already moving, his heart pounding as he crouched by the panels. His hands darted to the cables, but everything appeared intact. He glanced up at the flickering screens, his mind racing. "The connections are fine," he called out. "It's got to be something deeper." Emilia joined him, her expression grim. Could it be interference from the power surge earlier? "Maybe," Luke said, his voice shaking slightly. "But I don't know how to fix that." From her position in the control room, Naomi's fingers flew across her tablet as she accessed the backup systems. "We're switching to auxiliary power for the visuals. Troy, I need you to stabilize the audio feed now." "I'm trying." Troy snapped, sweat beading on his forehead as he adjusted the sliders. But no matter what he did, the static persisted. Jax's voice came through the comms, colder than ice. Focus, everyone. We need solutions, not guesses. Luke's mind churned as he stared at the malfunctioning panels. His earlier mistake had taught him the importance of attention to detail, but now he felt like he was staring at a puzzle with missing pieces. And then, like a flash of lightning, an idea struck him. The circuit relays, Luke blurted out. If they're overloaded, it could be causing interference. We need to bypass them and route the power directly to the panels. Jax hesitated for only a second before nodding. Do it. Luke grabbed a toolkit and crawled beneath the stage, his hands trembling as he worked to access the relay box. The space was cramped and stifling, but he didn't let it deter him. He identified the relays, their surfaces hot to the touch, and quickly disconnected the overloaded circuits. Using a spare cable, he rerouted the power directly to the panels, bypassing the relays entirely. Naomi, try the panels now. Luke called out, his voice muffled from beneath the stage. There was a brief pause before Naomi's voice came back over the comms, triumphant. We're back online. Luke, whatever you did, it worked. The LED panels flickered for a moment before stabilizing, their vivid images returning in full clarity. The static from the audio system faded, replaced by the smooth voice of the presenter as she continued her speech. The audience, though slightly rattled, began to refocus on the stage. Luke emerged from beneath the stage, his face streaked with sweat and grime. Emilia gave him a rare smile and clapped him on the back. Not bad, rookie. Jax approached, his expression unreadable. He studied Luke for a moment before extending a hand. Good work. Luke took the offered hand, his grip firm. Thanks. As the event continued without further incident, the team allowed themselves a moment of quiet relief. They had been pushed to the breaking point, but they had pulled through together. Chapter 7, Into the Fire. The event was back on track, the audience engrossed in the presentations and oblivious to the chaos that had unfolded behind the scenes. But for the crew of Luminous Edge Productions, the battle wasn't over. They had endured a storm of technical challenges, yet an unsettling sense of foreboding still lingered in the air. Naomi's voice crackled over the comms, her tone measured but with an edge of tension. Great recovery, team, but stay sharp. We're not in the clear yet. In the control room, Naomi's eyes darted between the monitors. The main systems were holding steady, but the backup diagnostics showed inconsistencies, minor fluctuations that could mean nothing or everything. She tapped her pen against the console, her instincts buzzing. Down on the stage, Jax observed the crew as they prepared for the climax of the event. A live performance that would seamlessly integrate sound, visuals, and lighting in a coordinated spectacle. It was the kind of high-stakes moment that either cemented a team's reputation or unraveled it entirely. And tonight, the stakes had never felt higher. Luke double-checked the cabling on the front LED panels. Jax instructed. His tone was curt, but not accusatory, a reflection of the pressure they were all under. Troy, test the sound feed for the performance. I don't want even a millisecond of delay. Got it, Troy replied, his hands flying over the console. Despite his usual laid-back demeanor, he was as focused as ever, aware that any slip-up could cost them everything. Luke crouched by the LED panels, his fingers tracing each connection with meticulous care. Every plug, every cable felt like a thread in a delicate web, one wrong move threatening to bring the whole structure crashing down. Beside him, Emilia adjusted the lighting angles, her sharp, eye-catching details that others might miss. Despite their earlier clashes, the two had developed a quiet camaraderie, born out of mutual respect for each other's dedication. How's it look? Emilia asked, her voice low. Solid, Luke replied. He glanced up at her, a small smile breaking through his serious expression. At least, I hope it is. Emilia smirked. No room for hoping, rookie. It's either solid or it's not. Luke nodded, her words echoing in his mind. No room for hoping. He tightened one last connection, his hands steady despite the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Meanwhile, Naomi's unease grew. The fluctuations on the backup diagnostics were becoming more pronounced, almost like a heartbeat, growing louder and faster. She adjusted the settings on her console, her mind racing to identify the source. Then it hit her, a realization that made her stomach drop. "Jax," she said into the comms, her voice sharp. "I'm picking up power surges on the main line. If they spike during the performance, we could lose everything." Jax's jaw tightened. He glanced at the countdown clock on the wall. "How long do we have?" 10 minutes, maybe less," Naomi replied. "You need to stabilize the power feed now." Jax's mind worked quickly, calculating the risks and the options. "Luke, you're with me. Emilia, take over monitoring the LED panels. Troy, stay on the audio." Luke froze for a second, the words sinking in. He's trusting me to fix this. He pushed himself to his feet, his determination outweighing his nerves. "I'm on it." The two of them moved quickly to the backstage area where the main power hub loomed, its hum now ominously uneven. Jax opened the panel, revealing a mass of cables and relays, some of which were visibly overheating. "See the problem?" Jax asked, his voice steady despite the urgency. Luke leaned in, his eyes scanning the setup. After a moment, he pointed to a section of the relays. "There, the load on those circuits is unbalanced. If we redistribute it across these paths," he traced a route with his finger, "we can stabilize it." Jax nodded, impressed. "Good call. Let's do it." The two worked in sync, their hands moving quickly but precisely. Luke rerouted the power while Jax monitored the readings on a portable diagnostics unit. The hum of the hub began to level out, its previous irregularity fading. "Almost there," Jax muttered. "Just a few more connections." Suddenly, a warning beep sounded from the unit in his hand. The power load had spiked again, higher this time. "Naomi, we're seeing another surge," Jax said into the comms. "What's the status?" "It's escalating," Naomi replied, her voice tight. "If this one hits, it's going to take down the entire system." Luke's mind raced. He glanced at the spare power couplers in their kit, and an idea formed, risky but possible. "Jax, we can bridge the relays with these couplers. It'll redistribute the load faster, but it's going to be tight." Jax hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Do it." Luke moved quickly, his hands steady despite the sweat dripping down his face. He attached the couplers, his mind laser-focused on the task. As he connected the final one, the hum of the hub shifted, becoming steady and even. The warning beep from Jax's unit went silent. "We're stable," Jax said into the comms. "Naomi, confirm." The relief in Naomi's voice was palpable. "Confirmed. Power levels are steady. Great work, both of you." The two technicians exchanged a look, a shared sense of accomplishment passing between them. They didn't need words. The moment spoke for itself. As they returned to the stage, the countdown clock hit 0. The performance began, the stage erupting in a dazzling display of light, sound, and visuals that left the audience in awe. For the crew of Luminous Edge Productions, it was a moment of triumph, a testament to their resilience and teamwork. But in the back of their minds, they knew the night wasn't over just yet. Chapter 8. A moment to remember. The final moments of the live event unfolded with a breathtaking crescendo. The stage shimmered with a cascade of lights, colors blending seamlessly with the visuals on the LED panels, while the sound system pulsed in perfect harmony. The audience was transfixed, their faces lit by the dazzling display. Luminous Edge Productions had done it. They had not only salvaged the show, but elevated it to a level that exceeded expectations. Naomi sat in the control room, her hands resting lightly on the console as she watched the event play out on the monitors. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to relax, her sharp features softening as a smile played on her lips. "Outstanding work, everyone," she said into the comms. "Truly." The crew backstage exchanged glances, their exhaustion evident, but overshadowed by a collective sense of pride. Jax leaned against the rigging, his arms crossed as he surveyed the stage. His typically stoic expression softened into something resembling satisfaction. "We did it," Troy said, breaking the silence as he pulled off his headset. He grinned at Emilia and Luke, who stood near the LED panels. "We actually pulled it off." Emilia smirked, adjusting her headphones. "Don't sound so surprised, Troy." Luke, his face still streaked with grime from the power hub, couldn't contain his smile. He felt the weight of the night's challenges lifting, replaced by a sense of accomplishment he had never experienced before. This was what it meant to be part of a team, to face the fire and emerge stronger. As the final performance concluded and the applause filled the hall, the crew gathered near the side of the stage. The client approached, her expression one of genuine gratitude. "You and your team delivered beyond expectations," she said to Jax, her tone warm. "This was extraordinary." Jax nodded, his professionalism intact, but the corners of his mouth lifted in a rare smile. "Thank you. We're glad you're pleased." As the client departed, Naomi descended from the control room to join the crew. She surveyed the team, her pride evident. "All right, everyone, take a moment to appreciate this. You earned it." Troy raised an imaginary glass. "Here's to us, masters of chaos." Emilia chuckled. "Speak for yourself. Some of us actually plan ahead." Okay, Naomi said, cutting through the banter with a rare laugh. "Let's save the celebrations for after the loadout." The team dispersed to begin dismantling the setup, their spirits high despite the long night ahead. Luke lingered for a moment, watching as the lights dimmed and the audience filed out. He thought about how close they had come to failure and how they had risen to the challenge. Jax approached him, his expression unreadable as usual. "You did good tonight, Luke." Luke turned to him, surprised. "Thanks. I didn't want to let anyone down." Jax nodded. "You didn't. You've got potential. Just remember, mistakes happen. What matters is how you handle them." Luke smiled, the words sinking in. "I won't forget." As the last of the equipment was packed away, the crew gathered outside the venue under the light of a fading moon. Someone, Troy, most likely, produced a battered portable speaker, and soon music filled the cool night air. They laughed, joked, and shared stories from the night, the weight of their shared experience binding them closer together. For Luke, it was a moment he would never forget, a night of chaos, redemption, and triumph. He realized then that this wasn't just a job, it was a calling, and he was ready to embrace it, whatever challenges lay ahead.